Tibet is a litmus test for what China is going to export to the rest of the world. Slow, subtle, coercive manipulation of online communication. Propaganda designed not to shock, but to slip silently into our everyday digital discussions. What about the Tibetans inside of Tibet? Because for them, their stimulus itself is a cage. It's an open-air prison. And after years of working in this field, understanding China, its tactics, I've come to one conclusion. It wants control. They want control of the narrative of the international community. So, Tibet and digital authoritarianism. But first, Dishtile. Dishtile means greetings in Tibetan. And this is Tibet, my homeland. The homeland that I've never seen but fight every day to be able to someday return home. I thought I would start this off with a little bit of a story of me, because the story of me is connected to thousands of Tibetans born and raised in exile away from their homeland. You see, this picture is this generation of my grandparents who fled Tibet over the Himalayas, walking on foot into India, Nepal, Bhutan, seeking refuge, finding a new home, where I was born, in India. But I was born stateless. So naturally, I was involved in the freedom movement. But like many students on this campus and elsewhere, our identity about our homeland and also your student identity very much separate, right? I wanted to be a neuroscientist. I was also involved in the student government. But little did I know, both China and my life had different plans for me. When I was an undergrad running to become the student union president, I received a flurry of messages. Messages that were actually threats, death threats, rape threats, and it didn't stop. So I asked the question, why was an undergrad running for student union elections in Toronto a threat to China? What does China want? And after years of working in this field, understanding China, its tactics, I've come to one conclusion. It wants control. Control, of course, it already has with its tight grip inside the newfound borders that they made from occupied nations, but also they want control of the international community. They want control of the narrative of the international community, how the international community speaks of China. So it targets us, all of us. Starting with Tibetans in exile, like me, threatening, intimidating us and our family members that are back home so that we can be silent. They spy on us, blackmail us. There's coercion of diaspora activists by using deepfake smear campaigns and spy malware. But also you in the US. Operations like Uncle Spam. They were creating fake US veteran personas online and then posting both critical but also defensive comments on tariffs and other policies. What's the goal here? To amplify division. To make democracy look a little weak, chaotic, and dysfunctional. Now let's take a look at Asia, Taiwan. I kid you not, there were articles that said, US forces will not come to assist Taiwan due to US changes in law. Fake. And in Burma, there were supposedly local voices online, accounts, that were supporting the military junta and going against a lot of the local resistance that was happening. But again, these accounts were state-linked. Not to mention another target is young people, the next generation of leaders, both in Africa but also in Latin America. What they were doing was starting these independent accounts online that were of course had inflated engagement, so many likes and shares, to sort of look like it's simulating grassroots support. But you know what they were doing, really? The long game was to create this idea that the West is no longer good. But not only that, what's the alternative? China. Beijing is the next alternative to the West, is the narrative they're selling to the young generation, even in Latin America, Asia, and Africa. And the state links, it's pretty obvious. When we look at the websites, they're hosted and registered in the Alibaba cloud in Beijing. They're spinning off state media that is exactly the same, but maybe translated and summarized by AI from CGTN or CCP propaganda. You see, digital authoritarianism has entered an AI-driven era, and that is being paved by China. Beijing is not only using generative AI, but also operational tools. What does it do with this? It's not only to censor and surveil, as we are talking about. It's also to manufacture, to create new narratives, to smear critics, but also to infiltrate our democratic debates everywhere. Let's take a look at the use of AI. Talking about generative AI. I've already talked about it, but let me give you some examples. Fake persona accounts, media outlets, mimicking independent sources. There's summaries of articles that are online, but they're fine-tuned to your local audiences. And then we see the operational use. What is that? With AI, you know very well. It is amplification at a rate you cannot imagine. Exponential rise to the generative AI, the fake news that they're creating, the propaganda, it's being all across various platforms amplified. What do they do with this? They're using it to extract personal data of US lawmakers, global leaders, and then they use it to inform their internal drafting of policies and strategies by the Chinese government. Let me give you an example. This is the illusory wishes attack that happened just a few months ago. Pop quiz, do you know how old the Dalai Lama turned this year? Somebody knew earlier. 100%, yeah, he turned 90, the big 90. So of course, the Tibetan community and well-wishers worldwide want to wish him a happy birthday, right? And so take a look at the image. Can you tell which one's a replica, fake malware? Hard to tell, right? Even for me, man. I looked at it and I was like, the one on the right is the fake one, okay? But mind you, look down, they even had this button for an encrypted chat, which took you to another website that would steal more of your information. And of course, they were not just doing this easily, they had also sophisticated malware that they were using to be able to take in your information. I'll give you another example. Same time, same topic, right? This was called the global check-in. There was a big map where you can actually give voluntarily your IP addresses to the Chinese government by apparently sending a wish to the Dalai Lama. Not only this, you're giving away your contacts. They understand what you're up to, what your devices are doing. But you know, AI and China both got it a little bit wrong. I don't know about your traditions, but in my tradition, take a look at the bottom right. It says, check in to send your blessings. I don't know about you guys, but as a Tibetan, I don't bless the Dalai Lama. If anything, he blesses us. Can you imagine? Somebody's like, oh yeah, I blessed the Dalai Lama the other day. Bro. Exactly. I still have it wrong. But back to the point. What is the goal? The goal of the Chinese government is to control, right? In every aspect, they want to control, both at home, but also abroad, by exporting its tactics. And what does this do ultimately? Shapes the future of an authoritarian rule. They're controlling, disrupting democracies, and you know, the Chinese government is really closer than you think. Rather than just knowing and understanding you, maybe they're shaping the way you think. Let's take a look into the control. With more than half the world, it's like 500 million surveillance cameras inside China. This is the level of control that they have. First, physical security checkpoints. You come by an area, they check your phones for any unauthorized content. 2, facial recognition system absolutely everywhere you can imagine. Airports, hotels, subways, factories, apartment complexes, and even public toilets. Bro, can't even pee in peace. So AI tools. What are other AI tools they're using? Okay, I already mentioned facial recognition, voice recognition. But have you heard about gait recognition? GAIT? It's biometric technology that basically identifies you by analyzing how you walk. Yep. They have Wi-Fi sniffers so that your phone and your computers that are nearby that vicinity are also tracked. Police doesn't just track your movement, your car, but they also track your phone usage, your electricity usage, and also package deliveries that come to your place. There's a social credit system, as you're aware of, right? But for the Chinese citizens. Now, can you imagine what there is for Tibetans who are second-class entities? I'll leave that up to you. So that's a peek into how they control. Next, how do they export? Countries have already begun exporting Chinese-style laws in digital tech. In Tanzania, Uganda, Vietnam, we already started seeing cybersecurity laws that they were implementing right after they meet someone from the Chinese government. In 2018, Zimbabwe, they actually signed a strategic partnership with the Chinese government and have a company called CloudWalk. What did they do? They built a mass facial recognition system with also using the national database to be able to surveil at the airports, railways, bus stations, you name it. So whether it's stealing the elections in Venezuela or anywhere else in Africa, you bet the authoritarians are working together. How does this impact us? Well, we see the sophisticated malware on our phones. We see also the spread of propaganda. I'm starting to see narratives like, oh, Tibetans are backwards. They should be grateful that China occupied them and stole their resources. Like, what? Really? One of the worst intentional byproducts, however, has been the psychological toll in our communities. There's fear. Out of fear of retaliation and surveillance. There's distrust and a chilling effect of self-censorship. But what is the impact to the international community? Let's take a look. First and foremost, it undermines independent media. We've been talking a lot in this stage about civic, open forums, spaces, but that is being threatened. We're seeing our young generation being manipulated, and what I think the Vanderbilt University professors themselves were calling it, a slow, subtle, coercive manipulation of online communication. The type of propaganda designed not to shock, but to slip silently into our everyday digital discussions. There's an erosion of trust in information systems. But I want to go back to the topic. The topic of this discussion is Tibet and digital authoritarianism. Tibet. How does one understand digital authoritarianism without understanding the autocratic regime that is imposing this oppression and what its intention is? You see, Tibet is a litmus test for what China is going to export to the rest of the world. It's important to look at Tibet because it's not just what's happening inside Tibet, but we'll start to see those tactics exported elsewhere. I'll give you a quick example. We've recently seen, just this May, leaked data proved that Chinese government is no longer using centralized system of surveillance. For example, as a Tibetan, there's no longer this benign entity that is watching over your WeChat profile in Beijing. It's actually decentralized in a way that they're in your locality. So back to Tibet. This is beautiful Tibet. This is what it looks like on a real map. And this is the national flag, where simply holding the flag can get you imprisoned, or singing a song in praise of the Dalai Lama can get you killed. Or simply, you could just disappear in the face of earth, just like the Panchen Lama, the second highest Lama in Tibetan spiritual tradition, who's been missing since the age of 6. You see, this control isn't just of one generation. It is one that is insidious and aims to transform all of the next. A cradle-to-grave project where 1 million of Tibetan children, that's 80% of our Tibetan children even as young as 3 and 4-year-olds, are being forced into state-run boarding schools. An assimilationist agenda to ultimately eradicate the identity as a whole. Because they know that that could give rise to dissent, criticism of the ones in power. The goal is to control so they can erase us completely. Now, how does digital authoritarianism look like in Tibet? It's a complete different terrain we're talking about here, where even brands like Apple are restricting their apps to enter the China market, where there's absolutely no option but to use WeChat, which you know, of course, is tapped, surveilled. Where even a supposedly anti-fraud app in China is actually another way to monitor Tibetans. They collect logs, messages, biometrics, and browser history. So you see, I was reflecting on what the keynote yesterday, Dr. Nito was mentioning about cognitive liberty. You folks remember a little bit? From my understanding, and again, sorry, it's a little limited. I didn't get to pursue my neuroscience degree as much as I wanted to. But she said, from my understanding, stimulus, and then there's a response. But prior to the response, if you pause, there's an opportunity to exercise your cognitive liberty. And then I thought to myself, so what about the Tibetans inside of Tibet? Because for them, their stimulus itself is a cage. It's an open-air prison where every aspect of you is surveilled, where you're not even, forget a response, forget a pause, you can't even have time to breathe freely. So what is happening behind this firewall, the dragon firewall? They don't want you to know. They don't want you to know what's going behind the scenes. You know why? Because they don't want you to know how they control, but they also don't want you to see the resistance of our people. The cost of sending a video of a protester out to the free world sometimes is a heavier price than just protesting itself. China wants control. Makes sense. But you know, they actually also want something else. Let me tell you. They want legitimacy. Legitimacy by lying to the international community about all that it does. But there comes us, the international community, which this legitimacy that they seek is something that we absolutely cannot allow them. Why? Because I'm telling you again, the Tibet is a litmus case for what China will export to the rest of the world. That's why it's important to look at Tibet, get access, study the tactics that are used there. You know, China doesn't even like the name Tibet. They're trying to erase the name Tibet. We have museums in France that have been trying to replace the word Tibet to Xizang. Do you know what Xizang means? I'll tell you, it's called Western treasure. We are a treasure, but not yours, China. And you see, these museums were slowly starting to change the word Tibet to Xizang. And also bigger museums, like the French National Museum, Musée Guimet, had started to change it to a little bit more vague. No longer say Tibet, but Himalayan world. Still technically correct, right? But you see, we don't stop there. The Chinese government, in 2022, we came to find out, has been collecting the data, not just data, the blood and DNA of Tibetans. More than 30% of Tibetans were already subjected to non-consensual blood theft and DNA theft. But you know what else we found out? We found out that an American company, the world's largest bioinformatics company, was actually the one that was selling the kits to allow the Chinese government to steal our DNA and blood. That's where we came in. They have a $40 billion annual revenue, and us a small organization, but we organized. We organized to be able to call out their lies, and within a year and a half, through shareholder resolution, shareholder engagement, grassroots mobilization, and government advocacy, Thermo Fisher halted its sales into Tibet also via third parties. So you see, we are doing our part. We're resisting. Both quite physically in front of Xi Jinping's face, that's in France, by the way, but also digitally. So I ask you to amplify the voices of the people in the front lines, like us, the Tibetans. Fund our initiatives, because we are coming up with innovative alternative tools to amplify and fuel our resistance. Because supporting Tibet will not only help us understand how China is going to export the repression outside to the rest of the world, but ultimately, it gives us an opportunity to show what the capacity of this global community is and what we can do to be able to defend our freedoms. Thank you.